The scent of fresh-cut grass wafted through the air as Jack stepped out of the therapy office, feeling more exposed than he had in decades. It wasn't just the warm sunshine that left him breathless. It was the realization that he'd finally allowed himself to be seen. Dr. Sophia's gentle touch on his arm as she guided him out of her office had awakened something deep within him. A spark of vulnerability, long suppressed by years of emotional numbing in the military, had begun to flicker to life. As a former soldier, Jack had mastered the art of compartmentalizing his emotions. He'd learned to push feelings aside, like a heavy curtain closing on a scene he didn't want to relive. But after his retirement, he found himself struggling to connect with others. Simple interactions felt like navigating a minefield. One wrong move could trigger an emotional explosion. Sophia's kind eyes and soothing voice had disarmed him, however. Her words were laced with compassion and understanding, as if she'd been waiting for him all along. She asked the right questions, listened without judgment, and slowly coaxed his defenses down. Their sessions became a sanctuary for Jack, a place where he could finally exhale and be himself, rough edges and all. He began to confront the fears that had held him back: fear of being hurt, fear of not being good enough, and fear of being seen as vulnerable. One afternoon, as they sat in her office, Sophia asked him to imagine his heart as a garden. "What would it take for you to cultivate intimacy again?" she gently probed. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jack's mind whirred, recalling all the times he'd pushed people away, afraid of getting too close. But Sophia's words lingered, and he began to envision his heart as a neglected garden, overgrown with weeds of mistrust and undernourished by love. He pictured himself kneeling beside it, hesitant at first, but then gently tilling the soil, exposing the tender shoots of vulnerability beneath. The image brought tears to his eyes, but this time they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of hope. As their sessions progressed, Jack found himself opening up in ways he never thought possible. He began to share stories about his military experiences, the camaraderie and sense of purpose that had once sustained him. Sophia listened attentively, her eyes sparkling with understanding, as if she'd been there alongside him. Their conversations became a dance of vulnerability, with Jack learning to trust himself and Sophia's gentle guidance. He started to see that intimacy wasn't something to be feared. It was a form of connection that could bring people together, like the threads of a tapestry weaving into a beautiful whole. One evening, as they wrapped up their session, Sophia touched his arm once more. "You're doing something remarkable, Jack. You're allowing yourself to be seen, and in return you're discovering the power of vulnerability." As he left her office that day, Jack felt the weight of his emotional numbing slowly lifting. He knew it wouldn't disappear overnight, but with Sophia's help, he was ready to tend to his heart garden, nurture its beauty, and watch intimacy bloom again. The scent of fresh-cut grass still lingered in his mind as he walked away from the therapy office, but now it symbolized a new beginning, one where vulnerability became the key to unlocking true connection with others. As Jack continued on his journey, he began to notice small changes within himself. He felt more at ease in social situations, and his relationships with those around him started to deepen. The weight of his emotional numbing was slowly lifting, replaced by a sense of freedom and openness. One day, as he was walking through the park, Jack stumbled upon a group of children playing together. They were laughing and chasing each other, their faces alight with joy. He watched them for a moment, feeling a pang of nostalgia wash over him. It had been years since he'd experienced that kind of carefree abandon. As he stood there, lost in thought, one of the children caught his eye. A little girl with curly brown hair and bright green eyes was staring up at him, her face filled with curiosity. Jack felt a lump form in his throat as she smiled at him, and for a moment he forgot about everything else. He knelt down beside her, and they started to play together. The other children joined in, and soon they were all laughing and chasing each other around the park. Jack felt like he was reliving childhood, minus the fear of being hurt or rejected. As the sun began to set, Jack stood up, brushing off his pants. He looked down at the little girl, who was now holding his hand. "Thank you for playing with me," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "You're welcome," Jack replied, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over him. I haven't played like that in years. The little girl nodded sympathetically. You can play again anytime you want, she said before running off to join the other children. As Jack watched them disappear into the distance, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. He realized that vulnerability wasn't something to be feared. It was what allowed us to connect with others on a deeper level. He made his way back to Sophia's office, eager to share his latest breakthroughs with her. When he arrived, she smiled warmly at him. "I'm so proud of you, Jack," she said. "You're doing amazing work." Jack nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over him. He knew that he still had a long way to go, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was moving in the right direction. As they wrapped up their session, Sophia handed him a small packet. "This is for you," she said. "It's a little something I want you to have." Jack opened it to find a small seedling inside, a tiny sprout of hope and vulnerability. He smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over him. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "This means more to me than you'll ever know." Sophia smiled back at him. "You're welcome, Jack. Remember, your heart garden is always growing, even when it feels like nothing's happening on the surface."